this video is going to give you an intro to recipes and what they are and how to use them. We're also going to cover off the AI-assisted recipes known as the Blu Recipe Assistant. So across to my account here, personally, I really love recipes. I should note from the get-go, some users love them like me, some don't, and they prefer to have single lines. So this is a kind of a personal preference type feature. If it suits your way of estimating, fantastic. If not, you can do the exact same stuff without a recipe as you can with. So this is really just an efficiency thing for those that want it. Awesome. Now I'm going to go and do, what's a good example for this? Let's go plaster. In fact, let's do, what else have we got? Let's do floor covering. That's a good one. So first up, what is a recipe versus a single line? So all of this you're looking at, I open the category, I see the items. These are all single lines. There's one line for one thing is the simple way to put it. If I use this recipe button, it now, let's put an item in and then go save, go close. This little button shows indicating that this line has components in it. So think of it as one line that represents multiple parts. And a common example I use, which I'm probably going to set up potentially as part of this video as well, is I use the example of doors. Think of the main line as door recipes. And you'd go in and you'd see the door, the jamb, the hinges, the lock set, whatever else you want. So another way to put it is they're a really good bundle of items, and that kind of leads into the next point, which is why do people use them? And they are the main benefits are you can have one takeoff that calculates multiple things. The other benefit is you can save them, reuse them. So you could potentially just drop the same framing recipe, for example, into multiple estimates without having to rebuild it. So let's actually go and do a recipe for this. So I'm going to go flooring. And this is going to be a bit of a basic one, but I'm going to say flooring per square meter. The recipe unit measure is super important. So what this does is kind of two things. If you go ahead and do the takeoff from this recipe, it dictates how the takeoff will be done, so in square meters. It also has bearing on how the calculations are done. So what we're saying here is all of this stuff down the bottom is what goes into one of this. So in my case, 1 square meter. But if I was doing a recipe for doors, I would have that as each, and I would say each of these things goes into one door. The easiest way I've found to think of it is when we're calculating, we care only initially about 1 square meter or one of the items or 1 linear meter. We care really just about this small sample. And then as the overall quantity gets larger and larger and larger, we multiply what we have by the total quantity to get, the number of items used total. So let's go back here, and for the sake of example, I'm purely making this up. So let's go flooring, and let's say it's like a floating floor. And I'm going to put the coverage of a box of floating floor, and again, I'm making this number up. Cover is, let's say, 20 square meters. As far as where I'm getting that from, if you're doing this as a real one, you would be looking on the website from the supplier, or often the package will say it on there. Especially things like insulation, we'll talk about, the number of square meters you get from a bag. So I'm going to say 1 box covers 20 square meters, and the way I tell it this is using the unit quantity box. Right now it's got 1 box. So if I was to make this 20 square meters, it would suggest 20 boxes, which is way, way too many. The way we get around this is we go into the calculator here, and the rule is always the number of square meters, in my case, that I need for 1 square meter. So the answer is almost always 1, but there are cases where we have double plaster or things that overlap, and the result will be different, but it's how many square meters do I need for this 1 square meter sample? So 1 square meter divided by the total square meters the box does, so 20. Another way to say it is this small 1 square meter sample uses a 20th of the box. If you want to triple check your own working here, there's a cheat way of doing that, and that is to do a bit of a kind of a thought experiment and go, hey, if the total measured amount was 20 square meters, like that should be one box, right? Because it's 20 meters per box. So put in the coverage down the bottom and it should tell you 1. That's a great way to triple check your own work and just make sure you're on top of it. Now, other things here, you could go and add whatever you want, labor, adhesive, etc. For the sake of example, I'm just going to put 1 in to begin with. And that leads me into then talking about these unit of measure minimum and unit of measure increment boxes, and then I'll talk about this actuals category. So what is UOM min and UOM inc? So simply put, this controls the rounding. So if I had, let's just make it up. I'm typing this instead of doing a takeoff. So I'm just going to go 250 square meters. It's going to say buy 12.5 boxes. Can't buy half a box. So that's the problem we're trying to solve. You can do this 2 ways. You can, there's 2 different controls that allow you to solve this problem. The increment is the one I use almost always because I just go make that a whole box. I can only buy half boxes. There might be cases where you have to buy 5 boxes at a time, and you can tell it group this into 5s. It's just rounding up so that when you actually purchase it, we've allowed enough cost to cover your purchase. The minimum, I don't use it that much, but there are legit cases for it. So just for example, I'm going to put concrete in here. Concrete obviously has no place in a flooring recipe, but if you are ordering concrete per cube, typically you might chat to the supplier and they go, hey, look, I'll deliver for free or deliver for X cost once you hit, let's say, 2 cubes. And then once you're over 2 cubes, we don't really care what the increment is. You know, you can go up in quarter cubes after that, but they basically have a minimum amount that you can order. Concrete for me is the easiest one to comprehend as an example, and just cover off what this minimum box is. Actuals category. So I'm going to start by saying most people don't need this, but I'll explain what it is and you can decide if, which group you fit into. If I go close, when I create the job and we transfer all the estimate costings into the job costings track sheet, the items in flooring will stay under the category of floor covering. If I say, actually, no, put it into appliances, which bit silly. For the sake of the estimate, it stays in here under the floor covering category, but it will transfer it to another category when the job is created. The main use of this, and probably, I guess the most common example would be where people do labor as part of recipes, but then they want, for the sake of the job, to see all the labor summed up under one category, regardless of what it's for. That's where people might choose to go labor. If you can spell, which I sometimes can, note that you can select from a drop-down showing the existing categories in the estimate already, or you can just tell it what to make, and when it creates the job, it'll create a new category called labor to bundle this together. Perfect, get rid of that. Now, last couple of points, we can save this whole recipe and it goes into the catalogs area under the My Recipes catalog. You can group it into category and subcategory. Personally, if I'm saving stuff, I only really group by category, but there are cases subcategories more useful. So save it and you can reuse it. You can reuse it by one of 2 ways. You can go browse recipes in here. You can see recipes on the right-hand side, or you can search using the drop-down quick search if you've got it switched on, and you can find recipes that way. Now that we've kind of covered all of the how does it work and the fundamentals of it, let's get to the cheating or the more efficient way often of doing this, which is the Recipe Assistant. This is an AI tool, so you basically describe the work you want. So I'm going to say floating floor, including labor and adhesive. As always, take off all calculator, and I'm just being a bit lazy and putting in an example figure. There are also suggestions. Literally all it's doing is looking at the category name, floor covering, and looking at what stuff you could potentially be wanting here. So these are just auto suggestions. You can also see the recent ones, which is awesome in the case that you just use it repeatedly. You can also save them, which is awesome if you want to have a list of your favorites, favorite prompts to get the outcomes that you want. Over here, just as a side note, we may have talked in an earlier video about integrating to suppliers. If you don't integrate with any supplier, then when it generates, it's going to use generic costing that it's just sourcing. If you do have a supplier connected and you say, do this, but for Bunnings products, or do this for Delson's or Bowen's products, it will do that. So all this is wanting to know is just who or where to sort the prices from, and how to display it. Generate. So what it's doing, 3 steps. It goes, first of all, and takes the prompt, splits it into the individual items. Then it takes the items that it thinks would be in there and works out the quantities. So it's looking at like, what's a box of flooring cover? And then it's sourcing the prices. And this is the one that's dependent on if you're using a supplier or not. If you're not using a supplier, the question we often get is, where on earth do you get the prices from? So the backbone of this is the same backbone that you would see in something like ChatGPT. So it's sourcing data essentially just from the internet. It will try and do its best to localize prices. So we do take your location into account. And this is the end result. I always recommend people read the assumptions, mainly just because I like to know how things are thinking, and I don't really like surprises. So this is going to have a whole bunch of information. Let's pick out some key ones. Labor rates updated from the reference rate carpenter. It's gonna, what else is it gonna do? No overlapping. So it's done it so that there's no extra waste. I can absolutely add waste in a second. Additionally, you can run this multiple times, so you could do it again and say waste 10%. Pack sizing, 20 kilo bag is standard for adhesive. Region, so pricing specific to Australia, and so on and so forth. Once you've got all that, there's really 2 ways you can finalize and use this. Add, going back to an earlier point, just adds them as single lines, which is great, gets the job done. Personal preference, I like to add as a recipe if I've done this AI thing because, well, really 2 reasons. Number 1, so we'll click into our new recipe. Number 1, it stores all the assumptions and notes, which I like if I ever have to come back to it. I didn't actually touch on this box previously, but even if you do your own recipes just from scratch, you can make your own notes to yourself, which would be handy to come back to later. Especially if you're going to save it, then saving notes is great. The other reason I like saving the Blu Recipe Assistant's result as a recipe, not single items, is I find it more reusable. Like if I copy from job to job and this becomes 385 square meters, all it's done is the maths on how to, how much of a box goes to a square meter, and hence a new measurement gives you new results versus if you add it as items, it's more just a single use type scenario. Lovely. Now that is a lot of information, and hopefully it's been helpful. As always, ask questions, let us know what you need to know, and we'll leave you to it.